All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. On today's episode, we have two very, very special guests, Lynn Redfern and Patty Montagnino. Ladies, how are you doing today?
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. For those of us that don't know anything about you or what you two do, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you help people, please?
Sure. So I'm Patty. I am a therapist. I'm an LCSW. I've been a therapist for over 20 years now. A lot of that time has been spent in private practice. So currently I'm practicing in North and South Carolina, and an extension or an evolution of my work at this point is to morph into coaching, which I'm now doing with my friend and colleague and someone I just admire and love so much, Lynn.
Thank you, Patty. That was a perfect segue into my introduction. I'm Lynn Redfern, life and executive coach. I've been coaching for over, 12 years. It's my absolute passion to help people just shift and change and see sustainable growth. And so this partnership with Patty is perfect. I've also done some life, or not just life and executive, but I've done some stress reduction and mindfulness coaching for some of the local hospitals. I've done some divorce coaching in my past, and just had a lot of different ways to help and serve the people in the community. So thanks for having us, Rich. This is exciting.
Yeah. Thank you two for hopping on today's show. So what motivated you two to start this coaching program?
So I think there's many people out there who've worked with a therapist or a coach, but there's really not that many people who've worked with both, and definitely not simultaneously. And I think that each of us just brings a different skill set to the relationship that we are noticing clients are benefiting greatly from. So it came about pretty naturally because we have known each other for so long and we've really admired each other's work and trust each other so deeply. We have been referring to each other for many years now. And there was always this desire to bring our two expertise like sort of under one roof. And several months back, I kind of got inspired, and I think I figured out how to do it, right? And so now we have formalized what we were doing informally. And so that is really what we wanted to offer people, was not having to choose between the depth that you can get when working with a therapist or the direction that you can experience when working with a coach.
Got it. And so, okay, let me kind of get my mind wrapped around this. So you work with clients who have a choice to work with a therapist and a coach.
So under our model, they're working with both. So they don't actually have to make that choice. So this is something we'll talk more about, but basically what we're doing is we are working in tandem with the same client. Think about it, if somebody is an athlete, right? They probably have a trainer, maybe there's a nutritionist, they have a whole team approach to helping their performance, and that's like us. And so even though a trainer can speak to nutrition and a nutritionist could maybe speak to mindset, there's people that they want to pull in because this is their expertise, instead of just staying at that higher level. That's what we can do for our clients, is that we can speak at that higher level so they don't have to sacrifice the growth for just because we've reached our limit in what our knowledge is.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Lynn, were you going to add something to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the beauty of what we've created is the fact that the client doesn't have to be their general contractor. We're going to piece this in, or I'm going to do the growth piece with the therapist for a couple months and see how I feel. And then, okay, well, maybe I'm going to reach out to my coach now and work on the direction and the next steps. And, I think Patty and myself personally have done our own personal growth journey, where we have personally had to do that, right? And so for me, it's oh my gosh, the coordination and the pricing and all of the things with life. Life is busy, and you bring in executives with high-powered positions, and it's difficult to fit everything in. So, not just what they're getting from us, from the coach, from the coaching perspective, but they're also able to lean into the two of us having conversations of how do we move this client forward. So you have two brains that are working behind the scenes to say, oh, wow, I heard this in the last session. We really need to focus on this and help them move this forward.
That makes a lot of sense. And I really appreciate that metaphor or the analogy of the general contractor, because we've all done work to our houses, I think, right, at some point, where that could be a pain in the butt, when you're trying to hire the plumber and then the roofing guys or whatever. And it's having a team that's already set up, I think makes things a lot easier, especially when they each have their own relevant experience, right? So yeah, that's really cool. I like to go back to something Patty said earlier. You said working in tandem. Now, when a client reaches out to you and they partner with you, are they working with both of you together at the same time, or is it like, separate and independent sessions, but together as a team? What does that look like?
Thank you for that question. So we actually really even start by giving our client an assessment that we developed that's going to help them and us understand what are they coming in with as far as priorities, where are they coming in with sort of blind spots, what's their preferred style of working with people, what are the things that they might be running into. And I think clients especially really appreciate it because they already feel so known when they get these results. And so this is probably putting words to something that they've maybe kind of thought was going on for them, but they didn't really know it because they had never quite seen it put together like this. And a lot of our executives, they're used to taking assessments. They're used to taking, Myers-Briggs or Strength Finders. They're used to but they don't quite have the nuance that our assessment has. So we were really intentional in how we created it. And we really feel like this is a great jumping off point because it creates already so much trust in us and in this process, because they really are like, oh my gosh, like if they can already know me this deeply, like we're already like several steps ahead. And then what happens is they get that report after they take that assessment, and then we will, talk through it together in a joint session. So then they get 75 minutes of the two of us together. So we're really going to get to know them. We're going to talk about this assessment. We're going to figure out where they want to go, what it is that they want to work out, like what are their pain points, because, we want to be able to have a roadmap for our time together. So our program is very much tailored to what's showing up in this person's assessment, where they're showing up in the session, and where we really feel like and where they feel like they want to end up by the end. And so sometimes I say where we feel like and they feel like, because sometimes we actually feel like, is that a limiting belief? Like, can you actually go a little further than you thought? So yeah, we're working this out together. And so it's a very dynamic kind of relationship. And then from there, we will then work one-on-one. So one session with Lynn and then go back and forth with a client until we get to the end, and then we'll come together again. But in the meantime, Lynn and I are having conversations between sessions so that there's always, what did you do and where did you leave off? And, where am I going to pick up from this point? And then but what am I going to work on 2 weeks from now, essentially, when I see them again? So we're very collaborative with each other, so that we are really supporting our client holistically.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Let me back up for a second. What do you help what problem do you help your clients solve?
Well, as far as our ideal client, we're looking at, mostly it's high functioning, intelligent, business owners, C-suite executives, people that, are high functioning and doing really well at their jobs, but there's just something still missing, right? I mean, maybe they've done the therapy, they've done some depth work, but then they never moved it forward, or maybe they've done the coaching and they're like, oh, I keep hitting this wall. Like there's just something that's just still in my way of achieving success. And, these are people that, again, are very successful in their job, and maybe they've just learned to be okay with not being okay, and sometimes we push and we get exhausted and we're like, wow, my life kind of looks really beautiful on the outside, right? But on the inside, there's still some stuff that, I really can't move past, and I'm not sure what that looks like. So that's really, in a nutshell, what we're looking for as far as our ideal client. Patty, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I beautifully said. And I think sometimes, we're dealing with people that are sort of simultaneously overwhelmed and underwhelmed. I think there are a lot of folks who got on the conveyor belt and did all the things that they were supposed to do, college and maybe grad school and first jobs and marriage and children and houses and, moving up the ladder there. And it doesn't exactly feel the way they thought it would feel, even though they took all of the steps that they, thought were for them. And so we are also just really acknowledging that, maybe it doesn't feel the way you wanted it to feel or you thought it would feel. So where can we come in and actually take all of the experiences you had, all the success you had, and really help you really just start to enjoy the life that you created? And if it's not the life that you created, what would that life look like? And just sort of give permission for people to say, you know what, you're not stuck where you are just because you've been doing it for so long. And Lynn and I, you know, we've had multiple life situations that we had to pivot. And we also too, you know, as parents and as partners and daughters, like we live these lives that are ever changing, right? And so we also find clients are like, they're parenting and their parents are getting older, so they're also sandwiched between these responsibilities that they didn't have early in their career, but now they have high level of responsibility in their lives and also a high level of responsibility in their work. And so there's this sort of work-life balance, which I think has probably eluded most of us. But yet we say it all the time. And so we really do try to help people create not work-life balance, but a life that they can love.
Intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Intentionality.
Yeah, that's so good. I'd like to take a second to ask about each one of your specialties. I know I think we kind of touched on them a little bit earlier. Patty, you know, clinician for 20 years. By the way, kudos and I salute you for that. It's a long career. Lynn, coaching experience, extensive work with several populations. So when you're working together with a client, are you guys kind of focusing on your area of expertise, or do you kind of incorporate a little bit of the coaching, a little bit of the therapy in your sessions? How does that kind of, how do you divvy up the responsibilities and how you apply your specialty?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like, you know, us being able to communicate clearly, Patty and I, around what is needed, that's, I don't know, another point of magic in the Allora experience for me, because we are tailor making it for you all along, right? It's like we have our processes set up, we have, you know, a specific framework, but we're also able to pivot. And I think that is where, like, we each can bring in our expertise. Patty bringing in the therapy side, me bringing in the executive coaching side. I mean, I've worked with CEOs of large corporations, worldwide corporations. I've worked with doctors. I've worked with lawyers. Like, I've seen and been in the corporate world. I know what it feels like to have a Teams calendar, a Microsoft Teams calendar that's completely full with meetings, you know, back to back from 8 to 5. I understand that world. And so I think I'm able to connect in that way. And then also say, like, okay, we're not going to come in and say, you can have the perfect, you know, life and work balance. It's not possible, right? But it is possible to, you know, set up those things, those systems with coaching. And like, how do I prioritize? What are the things that are most important in my life that I really want to spend my time on? And what are some of the things that we can cut away? And then Patty, obviously bringing in her therapy experience and the different things that we can use to get into the depth of some of the things that are holding people back. And Patty, I'll throw that to you too. I'm sure you have some more.
Yeah, it's great kickoff for me. So really what I find too is, like, we don't have to just look at the to-do list of someone's life, right? And Lynn is great at this herself, but then I have a little bit more ability to look at the context or the history. And so this helps us really stay within our scope of practice, but then treat somebody, you know, from all angles. So if somebody does have some sort of, you know, mental health issue going on for them, that really then can inform the work that I'm doing with them, but then also the work that Lynn is doing with them. So that, you know, we talk a lot about the field of being like trauma informed. So even though many folks have not, you know, necessarily specialized in trauma, we want a lot of our practitioners to be trauma informed, because there's things that you might do with someone who's experienced trauma that you wouldn't do with someone who, or vice versa, right? Like, you wouldn't do with someone who has experienced trauma that you might be able to do with somebody who hasn't, right? And so I think that's a really important piece of what we're able to do, because if someone has just had a significant loss, like, we want to be able to address the grief while also they're still showing up in other parts of their life. And so I think it's really important that we're able to take all of those things into account.
Yeah, you know, as you were saying that, Patty, just reminded me of like the overall kind of goal of therapy, right? Which is to take somebody who's gone from baseline and they've kind of dipped, so to speak, and then they're in like the red zone, like there's a problem, like they're reduced performance, anxiety, depression, whatever the presenting concerns are, and then kind of I like to say that the goal of therapy is kind of bring them back up to baseline, like a healthy level of functioning, a reduction of symptoms, whatever that looks like. But it sounds like like your team, the Allora experience, is focusing on some of those problems and also enhancing their living, right? So we're not just bringing them to baseline. We want to actually push that baseline up some. Does that sound
Yeah,
right?
I think that's a great way to put it. I think baseline was maybe just the limit from that old life, right? Or those old circumstances. And so we are actually saying, like, what if you could create another baseline? Didn't think of putting it in those terms, but absolutely, I think that's a great way to put it. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, awesome. I like to say, how can it be even better, right? I mean, that's a coaching term. It's like, oh, it might be good. It might even be great, but how could it be even better? And I think that's what we're asking people. They're coming to us because things don't feel better. Like, how can we move that forward?
And something you said earlier really struck me, and that is that, working collaboratively as a team. Well, let me back up. When an individual is working with either just a therapist or only a coach, it's hard to make those connections. Like somebody that specializes in one area can really kind of hone in on those nuances, on those stuck points, and share those with the coach via collaboration, so that coach can actually like examine that detail and kind of refine that treatment plan, so to speak, if that's a coaching term. I don't know if it is a coaching term, but you know what I mean? So I see the value of working with both together, where we're able to hone in on those nuances and make connections to our aim, which is how can it be better, right? Am I off? What do y'all think about that?
No, I think you're totally right. See, I'm going to speak from our friendship a little bit. So Lynn is a very good friend, and she's been a coach for a long time. And I know sometimes when I've got something going on in my life and I bring it to Lynn, I get Coach Lynn.
Wait, and actually sometimes I'm like, do you want Coach Lynn or do you want?
And we've actually had the conversation. And she's like, I'm going to, she'll say, are you open to coaching? I'm like, yes. So sometimes I think as a therapist, it would be a little bit odd for my clients if I were to switch into the perspective of coach if they're used to me being therapist. And I would not want them to feel like I'm pushing them beyond into then where they're at the moment. And I'm not saying that's what coaching is about. I'm saying it's just another perspective. And I think if you go in knowing Lynn is coming from a coaching perspective, and Patty is coming from a clinical therapeutic perspective, we actually can do a lot of work because we don't necessarily, that doesn't create as much friction for the client experience when coaches are doing some of that underlying work, and where therapists are trying to kind of create this reframing and I really think that that's really helpful.
Yeah, it's like two separate personas. My mind is thinking in AI now that, we work in that world a lot. And it's like, it's the personas, right? It's like, what you're getting from me, you're getting a little bit of a push and you're getting the direction, and then what you're getting from Patty. And not to say that a therapist can't wear both hats, but I think that that's where we can really clearly define that. And the client understands kind of where we're coming from. Not good cop, bad cop either, but.
I think we really love what we do. And I really think that comes through. And so I get to really be who I love to be in my sessions with my client. And Lynn gets to really be who she loves to be in her sessions with the same client. And the client, because we both love it, gets the benefit of all of that. And we're good at it, let's be honest too. But yes, like they really do benefit.
Oh, that's so good. It just reminds me of sports, when you walk in and you have strength and conditioning coach, and then you have a stretching coach, you know what I mean? And it's like, they both know a little bit about each other's world of expertise, but like they each specialize, and it's super cool as an athlete to walk in and meet both coaches, and like they're on your team and you know what to expect. And so I figure that it's kind of the same for a client. They walk in, they meet each of you, they understand what each of you brings to the table and your specialty, so that they can achieve the goals that they have. Wow, that's really cool. Ladies, I'd like to ask about assessments. Earlier, you mentioned the assessment. What does that assessment look like? Are those traditional kind of therapeutic assessments, or do you kind of create your own Allora assessment? What is that about?
So I did create my own assessment, and what I did was I used a little bit of what you might get from an Enneagram type assessment, so that there's sort of these like 9 broader sort of categories, and then something that you might get from the Myers-Briggs. So then there's these other like 16 kind of like combinations of qualities. So it's going to give people sort of their core drive types, which might sound pretty familiar to Enneagram. And so I was like, how can I take what I like and make it better? And so I was able to continue to like refine this assessment to really kind of get us down to where we can understand what drives people, and then they can understand what drives people. And then you may have a primary driver that's only a smidge more than a secondary driver. You actually may have 2 or 3 primary drivers that are very, very high at, because they are at the same level. So that's a great way for us to really start to understand our clients. And you don't capture that in any of the other assessments that I'm familiar with. And I realize that might be a little bit limited coming from a therapist perspective, but I just don't think that ours is far more dynamic than anything else that we've come across.
Gotcha. And is that like, would you consider that assessment to be like a clinical / coaching assessment? Is it both of those put together into one assessment, or does Lynn as the coach have her own assessment? What does that look
So
like?
we both work from it. So
Okay,
it's not
got it.
clinical in the sense that there's a diagnosis per se to come out of it, like any sort of other kind of rating scales or whatnot. But it's really kind of like, now we get to understand like what's the driving force between these people. If I were to pull it into clinical language, I could say, okay, if you're thinking parts or IFS, you're like, okay, I can see that these parts really, but I don't need to go there in order to get a lot of good stuff from this assessment. And then Lynn is able to use it for like information that makes a lot of sense for her. So I'll let her pick up there.
Yeah, well, and I just wanted to mention it's called the Archetype and Orientation. That's the name of the assessment. And just wanted to put a little plug in. Like, we have a mini assessment that you can take for free on our website at alloracoaching.com. So quick little commercial, but wanted to just say, like, we want to make it available to people. We want to give kind of that little like snippet of like, oh, this is something different. Like, it does give a little bit more insight into who I am. It does feel a little bit more, we had one of our clients who was like, oh my gosh, like, you see me. And we haven't even had really our first appointment with them. And they're like, oh my gosh, like, I feel seen for the first time. She even shared it with her husband. Her husband's like, oh my gosh, this is totally you. Like, this is you on paper. And so I feel like, Patty has done a fantastic job at, creating this assessment to really give us what we need in order to do the work most effectively. So I'm excited about offering it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thank you for plugging that in. I definitely want to include that in the show notes. So I want to actually talk about the client journey. So they do a consultation. Maybe they show up for the first session where they do that assessment, and then it's that 75-minute session with the two of you. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, gotcha. And then they start doing alternating or sessions that are alternating with each of you. What does progress look like?
I'll start first. I mean, progress, I believe, is defined in that first session by the client, right? It's the 3 of us as a team, the client, Patty, and myself, saying, what does success look like? And that's, basic coaching, right? It's like, we don't know that we've crossed the finish line if we didn't define what the finish line was, right? And so I think it's really important just to know that in this first couple of appointments, we're saying like, hey, what is it that you're coming into this experience for? What do you want? And then what does it look like? And so I think the communication between Patty and I, like, oh, I saw a glimpse of this, or, oh, wow, they came into this next session and they've accomplished X, Y, and Z while they're moving faster than we thought, or they're not moving as fast. What do we need to backtrack and look at? I'll also say that we have built into I think 2 of our packages, Voxer communication. And I think what is so unique and best about, or good about the fact that we're including that, is that a lot of the work that the client is doing is in their day-to-day experiences with life, right? It's not happening normally in the time that we sit down and have these appointments. It's happening in the space between. And so Voxer is an app that we use that we're able to communicate with the client in real time, offering a 24 to 48 hour window of response, but where they can send us a message via this app that says, hey, I went into the boardroom and I froze. Or I heard this thing and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to respond to it, or whatever the situation is, whether it's personal or business that they hit in that moment, they're able to send us that message, and Patty and I to be able to say, oh, wow, that was really real growth. Like they accomplished something, or, oh my gosh, wow, this is something we need to address in our next session.
Yeah, I mean, and this is so different from counseling, right? Where we try to be really boundaried and sort of answer things very briefly in email if we need to, but save it for session. And because we're working with a limited number of clients and it's under the umbrella of coaching, we are more, especially at different package price points, we are more available. That is built into what we're doing, it's not boundaries. It's just, this is the relationship. It says we are more accessible to you. We are a team with you. We want to know what's going on in real time with you. And so that moves things out of the this is your only appointment time. Better create your bullet list because this is all you get, 1 hour, and then you're going to have to wait. So it's really intentional to be more of a support system for our clients, the way that we are working obviously together, and then through the Voxer access.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that you to incorporate you call it Boxer, like
Voxer, VOX.
Oh, Voxer. Okay, got it. So that app is just so amazing because just hearing that the client has that capability to reach out at any moment is really cool. And it sounds like you have a lot more flexibility to help the clients in whatever direction you seem fit at the moment. So I think that's really awesome. I want to talk about your styles a little bit, more or less like your personality in session, if we can call them sessions. Some coaches / clinicians are very solutions focused. Others are very kind of laid back. They let the client lead. Others involve humor. Some don't. Some are, they incorporate a little self-disclosure. Others are like, nope, no self-disclosure for me. All great styles and personalities, so to speak. So I just wanted to ask and get kind of maybe your description of what your personality is in the session.
I love that question because I would say you can already feel kind of the vibe in this podcast, Patty and I. I think, whatever the client brings in, we're going to take note of kind of what that vibe is, right? First of all, just to make sure that we're in it with them. But I think that we all appreciate a little levity, right? When we're going in with life's big problems, so there's definitely going to be some laughing, right? There's going to be, for me, as I like to call things out, it's like I'm seeing something. What's happening behind the words you're telling me, kind of thing. So I'm a little bit direct, but in a kind and comforting way. I see this. Tell me about that, right? And the client might be like, "Oh, wow, I didn't know I was doing that," And so for me, it's like I'm gonna point it out, but in a really super kind way, and in a way that makes you feel comfortable, but also in a way that's like, "Oh, I noticed this pattern in you. Why do you do that?" And then, oh my gosh, wow, there's some really cool insight that's able to happen. So I think I have that unique ability to ask the hard questions, but also do it in such a kind and loving way that allows you to open up a little bit more. So I'd say I'm direct, I'm kind, comforting, I'm empathetic to a T, intuitive. And I think, the intuition part, Patty and I both share. Going into a client appointment, it's not just what they're saying, it's what's happening, and you being able to pick up on that energy, what's going on, and being able to kind of lean into that. And then I'll pass on to Patty.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
Well, yes, and right. So I feel like I bring a lot of relatability to and authenticity to my sessions. I'm probably I will listen a little bit more and really be thoughtful as I'm doing it right now in what I deliver. So I can be a very fiery friend, but as a clinician, I really try to just hold some of that and really be thoughtful about what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. And I can be, I can be a little direct too. And I think because there's this level of trust that exists with my clients, they can hear it from me. And I think sometimes this relationship that you have, and it's very like person-centered therapy sort of stuff. Like we're really trying to build a rapport. We're really trying to mirror our clients. We're trying to use the words that they use. So we may think we're hysterical, but if that's not our client's vibe, then we got to pull back on that. But I know Lynn has also been really masterful at putting in just a little bit of humor with somebody and kind of cracking them open a little bit, right? Because, it's sometimes doing something that's a little unexpected is exactly what our client might need to sort of like kind of like, I don't know, it's like a little shocking, but in a very light and fun way, right? And I think both of us are very good at that. And so, yes, I will use relatability and self-disclosure. And as a clinician, I really do think that my clients have appreciated that, that I have had some similar experiences, not total self-disclosure, but I've had some similar experiences, and that I've navigated myself through some really tough waters. And I think that actually gives me a lot more trust. And I know in the coaching world, because I've had a coach too, there is sort of this idea of like, oh, you just need to be half a step ahead or one step ahead or two steps ahead of your ideal client. And for some coaching, maybe, but I actually think that Lynn and I are really special, and like, we've done a lot of work, and not that we needed a lot of work, but we're just human beings, and we're curious, and we want to evolve, and we want to grow. And so I really do think we speak from having been through in the very tough places that some of our clients are, and then having felt like, we were doing so much better, and then feeling like that there was actually a lot of uncertainty in that place that was supposed to feel better and be better, because objectively it was better, and that we've actually even seen us, ourselves sort of get to the place where we're like, oh, okay. And that's really that integration place. And I think if you have a coach or a clinician who's not gone through sort of all of those steps, not that you're doing a disservice. I just think, for the clients we're looking for, that's something they're really, really appreciating.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense. And it's really cool to know that you use humor when appropriate. Because in my own very brief experience as well, I find that shaking the client up using humor can be very, very effective, because like they can't be mad. If you say something that's like a little, that's meant to shake them up, but like you do it in a fun and humorous way, like they're like, okay, yeah, I guess. It's like you can't even be angry. So that's really cool that it sounds like, like you said, Patty, both of you are really masterful at using the right approach when appropriate, and involving that humor. I think it's really cool. And also, I think the fact that you two, it sounds like you've also been in those trenches. You've done the work. You've seen coaches, maybe even therapists. I don't know. But yeah, there's something to be said about a clinician or a coach who has gone through the similar things and put in that same amount of effort, into their own growth. And so I think that's a really unique piece of your Allora experience. So let's say somebody's doing the work. They've been showing up weekly or bi-monthly, whatever that looks like. They've been doing it for a while, and they're kind of nearing the end. How do you know when it's time to kind of graduate or terminate a client, if that's the right word to use?
I'll just say, our packages are specifically timed, right? So they last a certain amount. We have that kind of upfront. I think, when they get to the end of like their package and the appointments have been met, I think it's really having that conversation, Patty and I, with the client, and saying in the final, we have a final appointment where we sit down and talk about, where have we been? Where are we now? How are we feeling? And, deciding whether they need to like re-up, right? And go into something more or continue on. And so I think that it's just that communication point of like, where are you? Did you achieve what you wanted to? And if you did, great. What else? Like, what's next? Mm-hmm. Right? Because it might be that we focused on, something very specific for that coaching package, but there's something else that has come up along the way that they really need to like have an extended amount of time. But I'll pass to Patty, but that's my.
I think that's a great answer. It's, different than therapy, which we don't know how long that relationship is going to last. And sometimes, we think things are bopping along great, and then we actually don't continue with the client, and we're kind of even surprised by that. We know that we're going to work together for a set amount of time, and we do have we do have a roadmap for that time. Now, granted, we may take some detours, and that is totally, totally fine. And so then when we do get to the end, we're like, oh, okay, do we still have work to do here? And I think what's really special about the way we work is that I think people will realize like, oh, I didn't know I could work on this. Mm-hmm. Or I didn't know how important it would be for me to continue on in this healing to work on this. And I think that's probably something that we come across a lot. Like people think they're coming in for one reason, and they are. And then there's also some other stuff going on that they trust us. They've lived, this one package, and they're like, oh, actually, I want to keep going because I really see the value in the work that we've done. And so we do naturally continue with folks because there's more for them to sort of work on at that point in time.
I'll jump in too and say life events also happen during the coaching experience where they're like, oh, maybe divorce, or maybe, a death in the family, or something else that happens during the coaching time that then warrants extending, right? Because life happens along the way. So I'll add that in too.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And thank you for clarifying that, because I was under the impression that I was kind of formatted the way insurance is, right? Where it's like, hey, you get approved, then you can just kind of keep going unless insurance puts a certain limit on it. But if there's a bona fide need, then they'll continue to reimburse depending on the insurance or whatever. But so it sounds like there's a time limit with your packages. Do y'all want to share about what the package lengths look like? Like, what are the options?
Patty, I'll let you take that one.
Oh, okay. So we have packages that essentially are 12 session packages. They are meant to be completed within about 16 weeks, right? So that we understand that maybe there's a week where people are out of town, or, there's a lot of other life stuff going on. They can't meet. We want to stay consistent with somebody so that they can sort of continue that momentum. And then sometimes maybe there's twice in the same week that they speak to actually, both of us, right? And that would be okay too. So what we want to do is we want to give this a time limit. So say like, okay, here's our 12 sessions that we want to complete in 16 weeks. So again, we're on the road, and we want to know like, how long are we going to go before, we get to the end of this leg of the journey. And so that's sort of, how it's structured. And that's pretty common in coaching. So it's not as common in therapy. So that's a very there's a container to it. And so also because we have the assessment, we have that initial conversation, we can create sort of what we believe the arc will be, and then we can always change it mid sort of journey, so to speak, in case we're not exactly going where we thought we were going. But we do have those, it's 12 sessions. You've got the 2 sessions with both of us. And then if you do a higher level package, you actually get 1 more session with the both of us. And then we have, some of that in-between communication that's there to support the client. But that's that. And I think that's really clear. And I think some people hesitate, especially those working at sort of like those very busy professionals that are working at this high level. They're thinking, I don't even know how I would fit this in. And I think just to say like, it is a limited amount of time. Like, can you commit for this amount of time? I think that actually is a great way to get people to try something, because they're not married to it, and then they'll stick around long enough to get some value from it.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And the sessions, are they hour-long sessions?
Yeah. So the for the first session or in the last session, that's when it's the 2 of us. That's a 75-minute session, and then otherwise it's an hour long.
Got it. That makes sense. And what about between sessions? I know there's the ability to communicate with the 2 of you. Do you all maybe issue a kind of homework or like reading or any kind of assignments so that they can continue that work outside of the sessions?
Yeah, I mean, I think Patty and I both have a vast amount of resources that we've experienced personally, and also just that we have used with our clients, books, podcasts, anything else to just kind of help, bolster the work that we've done during the session. I wouldn't say like a ton of homework, but there's optional things. Again, we're working with executives, people who are super busy. We're not requiring any, reading or anything else. But I think, if you would like more, is there something you want to dive in deeper? We have, this list of resources or this specific thing that we've talked about that I think could help.
And I'll even say too, and for some folks, I would not give them homework. If you've got somebody that's also sort of trying to win at coaching, maybe this is a person that should not have anything to do between session that's other than maybe the very gentle things. Like, did you sit in the grass for 5 minutes, right? So I think homework can look like a lot of things too. And I know, we talk about like things of like moving it forward.
Yeah.
For some of these folks that we're working with specifically, a lot of it is slowing it down. A lot of it is really being far more present. And so we also have to just know who we're working with to know like what
yeah, it might be boundary setting. It might be doing less, not doing more. So
correct.
Go on vacation, take some time off. That might be
what a great point. Yeah. And it makes sense that if you're working with kind of like those C-level executives and people who are at that level, like, and they want to win, like maybe they're like, I got to get this right, do this thing, and yeah, it's so insightful to hear that, Patty, that you're trying to assign or offer things that will serve them in their treatment, whether that is slowing down, setting boundaries, or maybe speeding up in certain areas. So that's really cool. What would you want the audience to know? Maybe they're listening to this or liking what you're saying. They want to partner with something like this because it's so unique, but maybe they're reluctant because they've never maybe worked with a coach or a therapist before. So this is just a whole new experience, but they are curious. What would you want them to know?
Yeah, no, I think if people are liking what we've said today and they're excited about kind of this new concept of dual coaching, I would really encourage you, to reach out to the mini assessment that we have offered, and just understanding that it's the depth and the direction that we believe you really need to have the sustained growth.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I do think that if anybody's curious, there's a mini assessment that's going to give you some feedback right away. And then there's the deeper assessment that's going to give you a lot more. So that's a great place to start if you're not quite sure without having to make the investment towards coaching. And so once you do that, then you can make a decision at that point. And, I'm someone who's been an entrepreneur for a very long time. And I realize that a lot of your audience, Rich, might be folks who are working in their own sort of private practice, small group practice, whatnot. And so that we too are entrepreneurs and have a lot of those skills that are, also just unique to some of the folks in this audience too. And yet, so I know it's like some therapists are like, are you a therapist that sees therapists? And it's sort of like, and also a therapist that's looking for a business coach. And so I think in this audience in particular, this is a really unique offering that we have because we do come from those two places. And I think that, if anyone is curious, reach out, let's have take the assessment, see what you think, have a conversation. And maybe there's like just a different way to think about the way you're working that has even been sparked from our conversation to say like, hey, we actually thought this would be a really cool spin on the work that we've been doing for so long.
Yeah, and I do want to just piggyback on that, Patty. We do offer the full assessment separate from the coaching packages. And so just to say that, like, if you do just want kind of that introduction to the assessment and how do you feel, and you can get that debrief, we do offer that on our website as a separate. So we just wanted to make that available to you. Wanted to point that out.
Got it. That's really cool. So I like to shift gears a little bit and ask a couple of questions, kind of specifically for the therapists who are watching this. And I know you kind of touched on this in your previous answer, Patty, but I'd like to kind of dive in a little deeper. What would you say to a therapist who is kind of feeling stuck in their practice or group practice? Maybe they're a contractor, maybe they're an employee, and they're not sure what the alternative looks like.
Take the assessment. What would I say? I think this is a great time for folks to get creative, right? I think that just like someone who's at a C-suite executive level, anybody who's a therapist who they thought it was going to be something that maybe it hasn't turned out to be. And I think we all have had experience of like, well, I thought it would be a little different than this. So I do think that there's and there's ways to be really creative. And I think right now this is a great time to tap into that creativity. And there are people that are doing what Lynn and I are doing maybe not exactly the same, but they're doing things a little differently. And I think that we're in a place where doing something actually a little differently is often what people are looking for. Because if you're kind of like, I don't know if I want to do this as a therapist, we're hearing this, like, I don't know if I want to do this at the executive level. So we're all sort of feeling something similar. And I think this is a great time to sort of tap into, and also understand, like, well, what am I all about? What do I value? Like it's not too late to pivot. And if anything, Lynn and I have made many pivots. And if we had not had the experiences that we've had, we wouldn't have made the pivots that we've made. So none of our experience was for like, well, that was terrible or a waste of time. And I think we can use all of it. And so I would really say to people, to just think a little outside the box. And I know, Rich, you're great at that. And see what starts to kind of feel like, that's interesting. Like, what piques your curiosity? If it piques your curiosity, you're going to want to do that kind of work. And then you're going to be excited to do that kind of work. And people are going to want to work with you because you're excited to do that kind of work.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a really great insight.
And I think that's really important, so that if there is something that falls, listen, as a clinician, I'm not a marriage and family therapist like you. I will say to people, I know a little bit about, what the Gottmans talk about, but I'm not a marriage and family counselor. I think that's who you need to be in front of. Lynn has sent people to me as a trauma-focused therapist, when she's like, I know a little bit about, or a lot about, neuroscience and trauma, but that's not my lane. And I really think like you want to work with people who are very clear about what they do know and what they can help with and what's outside of their scope of practice.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to ask about feedback. What has been the feedback from clients about the work that they've done with you?
I would say just the fact that coaching specifically, that they're able to move forward at a pace that they didn't think they could. And I'm not saying that every client's like that, but I feel like having both the depth and the direction has allowed them to do the work in a quicker way. And so we've heard that. I think they've heard just being able to work with Patty and I has given them that confidence that they need, that they have two people that are talking not about them, but about what's going on with them, that makes them feel more supported. Again, just going back to the contractor reference in the beginning, they're no longer having to piecemeal their personal growth, but they have two people that are really coming together and helping them move forward. And they've seen some really great strides forward again. Because of that, and being more focused on exactly what they came to coaching for.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I like to shift gears and ask about the horizon. What does the horizon look like? Are you thinking about potentially adding another clinician, therapist, stakeholder, like team member, maybe a nutritionist? I don't know what would kind of support your mission, but is there maybe the possibility of another element added to the Allora experience? And if so, what does that look like?
I'll let Patty go first. I'm curious.
Yeah. I mean, I have a million ideas. I think that I don't know necessarily another team member at this point, but we will do some corporate team coaching. We will do team training that's rooted in some of the information that we can glean from the assessment, so that this team can, like a workshop that can work better together. So there's those sorts of essentially foundationally what we're already doing, but we're just taking it to different audiences and different packages, right? So we can work with a team that is going through some sort of transition or change, and we want to get those 5-6 people working better together. How do we do that? Well, we come in, we give everybody the assessment, we go over like what all this means and who they're, I mean, without like disclosing everybody's business, but just like, oh, okay, now I can understand you better, and I can understand you better, and you can understand me better. Now that we have this information, how can we work better? And because we can be very dynamic, we can speak to whatever the issue is that's going on that they brought us in for, or we can do just a half-day training that's like far more general and a little bit more broad. And again, just continuing to help people understand themselves better and understand each other better, I think is going to be a great service within corporate spaces. So it's not just about the metrics of the results of the project. Like, are we working well together? I mean, there's data that says like everybody should have a work best friend. So if you leave and you bring your work best friend with you, like you're going to have like a more successful, transition or whatever that is. Like, and I miss having a work best friend. And that's partly why, I have, why I decide, like, why this made so much sense for me. I'm like, I want my work bestie. And so there's so many fun things that we can do. We could do a retreat. We could do so many other things. And that's maybe where we would pull in some of those other folks that maybe would do different workshops or whatnot. But I mean, listen, I can dream big too, so.
We love collaboration. So, you said nutritionist, I'm like, why not? Meditation specialist? Yes. Like whatever it is, we see that in the horizon. And I'll follow on what Patty said about just being curious, curious, staying open, being excited about what comes, our way as we continue to do the work. Look out, Tony Robbins, we're coming for your stage. Who knows where we're going.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. That's awesome. And going back to something you said earlier, Patty, about the morale being probably and arguably more important. And I know you didn't use that word specifically, but that's what's coming to my little brain is the morale, that spirit de corps, that camaraderie, and I was in the service for a long time, and they value that more than anything else. They're like, as long as we are tight as a unit, as a platoon, whatever, like everything else will fall into place, and that is something that they acknowledge is unmeasurable, like you just get a feeling, as silly as that sounds, for some people that are very data and metric driven. So I really resonate with that, that approach that, sometimes it really is working on those immeasurables, so to speak, that help just promote the culture of a business and take it to new levels. So I think that's really awesome. So if there are any of our viewers that want to reach out, they want to partner with you, they like this new experience that you've been able to put together, how can they reach you?
AlloraCoaching.com. That's our website, and it's ALLORA. And we have, we're both on Facebook and Instagram, and it's Allora Coaching there as well. So if they look us up on either of those two social platforms, you can find us there. And thank you so much for having us. This has been fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you all for coming on the show today and sharing a little bit about yourselves and how you help people. And maybe we could do it again in the future. How does that sound?
Yes.
I'm in.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
thanks for asking. We're holding you to it now.
Well, thanks for hopping on, ladies. I really appreciate your time. And for everybody tuning in, thanks for checking in. And until the next one, see you then.